They tell me I was the best tactical mind in the Caldrath fleet, 23 years of service, 400 successful campaigns. I have seen empires fall and stars go dark, and none of it prepared me for the moment I watched 3 human children walk away from the wreckage of an entire armada, hand in hand, without a scratch on them. I am writing this account because someone needs to remember what happened, even though my superiors would rather I stayed silent. So let me start at the beginning. We found the human transport ship drifting near the edge of a quiet system. Our scouts reported minimal resistance, mostly civilians, a handful of crew. Command saw an opportunity. If we could not defeat human warships in open battle, perhaps we could win a different kind of victory. Perhaps we could capture something valuable enough to make Earth negotiate on our terms. That is how we found the triplets. 3 children, identical in every way, with the same steady brown eyes and the same calm expressions. They could not have been older than 10. Their parents were crew members who fought to protect them until they were overwhelmed. I remember the report calling it a clean capture. No casualties on our side. The children did not scream. They did not cry. They simply watched us with an attention that felt, even then, slightly wrong. I was assigned to oversee their containment. My superiors believed the children would be useful as leverage, proof that we could threaten what humans valued most. I did not question the order. I should have. The first days were unremarkable. The triplets were given a shared chamber, modest but secure. They ate what we gave them. They slept when the lights dimmed. They spoke rarely, and when they did, it was only to each other, in words too quiet for our translators to catch clearly. I remember telling my second officer that the children seemed unusually composed for their situation. She said it was shock. I wanted to believe her. But small things began to happen. A guard reported that his weapon failed to charge properly after handing a ration tray to one of the triplets. He assumed it was a mechanical fault. 2 days later, a different guard noted the same issue. Our engineers checked the weapons and found nothing wrong. I logged it as coincidence, though something in me did not accept that explanation. Then came the matter of the patrol schedules. On 3 separate occasions, the children asked their caretakers questions that seemed innocent at the time. When does the next shift begin? Who watches the door at night? Does anyone check the lower corridors? We answered without thinking, because they were children, and children ask questions. Looking back, I understand now that they were not merely curious. They were building a map. My superiors decided that the triplets would serve a greater purpose. Instead of keeping them hidden, we would use them in a broadcast to Earth, a demonstration of our reach and our resolve. The children would be presented before Earth's leadership as proof that resistance carried a cost. It was meant to be our finest moment of leverage. It required moving the children through the central command deck, past our primary systems, past our most experienced officers, into the heart of the ship. I argued that this was unnecessary risk. I was told that 3 unarmed children posed no threat to a fully crewed warship. I did not push further. That decision haunts me still. On the day of the broadcast, I walked beside the triplets as we moved through the ship. I noticed how quietly they observed everything. Their eyes moved across control panels, security terminals, structural supports, the placement of every guard. They said nothing. They asked nothing. And that silence, I now understand, was more dangerous than any question. We reached the central deck. Cameras were prepared. Officers gathered to witness what command believed would be a historic moment of intimidation. Instead, everything unraveled within minutes. One of the triplets, the one who always stood slightly ahead of the others, reached toward a support column as we passed and pressed something small and thin against it, something I did not even see him remove from his sleeve. I did not think anything of it in the moment. Children touch things. It seemed harmless. It was not harmless. It was the first domino. Moments later, the ship's internal sensors began reporting false readings across multiple decks. Doors that should have remained sealed slid open. Security drones, which relied on facial and heat recognition, suddenly treated our own crew as unregistered intruders. Alarms sounded, but they pointed our forces toward each other instead of toward the true source of the disruption. I remember shouting for someone to lock down the system, but the system no longer listened to us the way it should have. The second triplet, the quiet one who rarely spoke even to her brothers, had somehow accessed a communications terminal during the chaos. I do not know how she did it so quickly, or how she understood our language systems well enough to issue false commands. But within moments, entire sections of our fleet began receiving conflicting orders. Ships that should have held formation began drifting. Ships that should have stayed silent began broadcasting distress signals to each other, spreading confusion faster than any of our officers could correct it. I want to be clear about something. At no point did the children raise a weapon. At no point did they strike anyone directly. What they did was something far more unsettling. They turned our own systems, our own trust, our own assumptions against us, piece by piece, until an armada of hundreds of vessels could no longer function as one force. The third triplet, the one who had touched the support column, moved toward the primary control hub. I tried to stop him. I remember reaching for him, expecting to grab a frightened child. Instead, he stepped aside with a calm, practiced motion, as though he had rehearsed this exact moment 100 times. I do not know where a 10-year-old learns such precision. Perhaps this was simply how human children were raised, quietly, patiently, to endure and to act only when it truly mattered. He reached the hub and, without any visible urgency, disabled the coordination array that linked our capital ships to their support fleet. It was not a violent act. It was a small, deliberate motion, the flip of a switch, the pull of a cable. But its effect was enormous. Without coordination, our ships could not maintain formation. Without formation, they became vulnerable, isolated, drifting targets for each other's confused defensive systems. I watched, frozen, as the pride of the Caldrath fleet collapsed into disorder within the space of perhaps 20 minutes. Ships collided with debris meant for enemies that did not exist. Defensive systems fired on friendly vessels mistaken for intruders. It was not a battle. It was a controlled unraveling, engineered by 3 children who never once raised their voices. And here is the part I still struggle to explain to my superiors. The part that troubles me more than the destruction itself. They could have done far worse. I later learned, through recovered logs, that the triplets had access to systems that could have caused catastrophic loss of life across the fleet. They chose not to use them. Instead, they disabled, delayed, and confused. They locked doors instead of opening them into open space. They rerouted power away from weapons instead of overloading reactors. They created chaos that crippled our capability, without ending lives that did not need to end. When our remaining forces finally regained partial control, the triplets were sitting calmly, near an escape pod bay, waiting. Not hiding, not running, waiting, as though they had known exactly how long the disorder would take to unfold, and exactly how long they needed to wait for what came next. What came next was a single human vessel, small and fast, slipping through our broken formation with practiced ease. It docked without resistance, because there was no coordinated resistance left to offer. The triplets walked aboard together, unharmed, unhurried, the same calm expression on their faces that they had worn since the day we captured them. I stood on the observation deck and watched them go. I did not try to stop them. I do not think anyone could have, not by that point, and some part of me, the part that still valued survival, understood that trying would only invite a worse outcome. Before the ship left, one of the triplets, the girl, turned and looked directly at the camera feed I was standing near. I do not know if she could see me specifically, but I felt as though she could. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply nodded once, the way one might acknowledge an opponent who had fought fairly, even though we both knew the fight had never truly been fair. Then they were gone. In the days that followed, our command tried to understand what had happened. How could 3 unarmed children dismantle an armada without spilling significant blood? The answer, I have come to believe, is that we made a fundamental error from the very beginning. We saw children and assumed helplessness. We saw silence and assumed fear. We saw calm and assumed shock. Every assumption was wrong, and every wrong assumption became a weapon we handed to them ourselves. I have reviewed the recovered footage many times since. What strikes me most is not their skill, though it was remarkable. It is their patience. They waited through days of captivity without complaint, gathering information quietly, never revealing what they knew, never acting until the exact right moment presented itself. And even then, when they held every advantage, when they could have caused devastating loss of life among a fleet that had taken them from their families, they chose restraint. I do not know what kind of society raises children capable of such calm, such control, such deliberate mercy in the middle of chaos. Perhaps that is the truest lesson of that day. We had always measured human strength by their warships and their weapons. We never considered that their true strength might be found in how they raised their young, teaching them patience over panic, precision over rage, and mercy even when mercy was not required. I submitted my full report to command, though I doubt it changed much in how they view humanity. Some lessons are too uncomfortable to accept quickly, but I know what I saw. I saw an armada, built over years, undone in less than an hour, not by superior firepower, but by 3 quiet children who never once needed to raise a weapon to prove how dangerous they truly were. If there is one thing I would tell any commander who still believes human children are easy leverage, it is this: do not mistake their silence for surrender. Do not mistake their patience for weakness. And whatever you do, never underestimate what 3 calm, quiet minds can accomplish when they work as one. We captured 3 human children that day, believing we held the advantage. We were wrong from the very first hour.